Welcome back to the Age of Political Review. Today's topic is the recent string of immigration deaths in Japan. So the question is, look, when someone dies in the custody of Japan's immigration or police detention system, it's who investigates what happens. And it's what happens is that in almost every case, it's the same people who are holding them. It's not a coroner, it's not a court, it's the same agency. And that single fact is related to a string of deaths, most recently by a Kurdish actor named Murat Çiçek, who died in a police detention cell in Tokyo on July 2nd. And there's a second case of a woman from Sri Lanka, Wishma Sandamali, who died in immigration detention in 2021. So these two cases are really, really important because they're just more than two cases. It's something bigger than just unfortunate, isolated incidents. So look, I'm not going to go over these cases specifically. What I want to do is make some arguments and what this kind of stuff reveals, that there's a lack of accountability. There's questions about who bears the risk, the responsibility, about where Japan's immigration and detention policy is headed, and what it means for the 4 million or so foreign residents that call Japan home. So here's some statistics by the Global Immigration Detention Agency. It's called the Global Detention Project, sorry. Some interesting statistics from a few years ago, but they say that Japan has no independent coroner system under their research profile. There's also no legal ceiling on how long someone can be detained. In a lot of countries, that's a problem too. For example, Thailand. Thailand, you can be detained for more than 30 days. I think it's like 37 days without any kind of judicial review. But then, of course, later on, they release you. Here, there's no questionable, reasonable, defined ceiling on how long someone can be detained. This is not a concern that is raised by talking heads like me, academics. It's raised by by human rights activists and the United Nations themselves. The UN Human Rights Committee, the Committee of Torture, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, CRC. Look, every single member state, 193 member states, their human rights records are reviewed every 4 years under something called the Universal Periodic Review. And every treaty that a state is party to has their own review mechanism, okay, with respect to each committee. In separate reviews over the course of more than a decade, they have said, what is Japan's maximum detention period? There is none. And what is the independent way? Where is an independent way to challenge that? And in 2025, the end of 2025, 7 months or so before Chichek died, the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination asked Japan a series of questions, point blank. Do you have access to judicial review? Do you have independent complaint mechanisms at all? The fact that the question gets asked over and over and over again should give you some answers as to where the policy is heading. So you can see the practical effect of the gap here. In both cases. In Chichek's case, it was the police who conducted the autopsy, and the police who characterized the result as being an illness, and there was no other further detail released. But it was his family, not any Japanese oversight body, who demand an independent autopsy once his body reached Turkish soil. In Wishma's case, the Immigration Services Agency's own internal review in 2022 said it could not determine the cause of death. But it was her own family's civil suit, not a government inquiry, that has produced the most detailed account of what happened to her 4 years later. A 2026 report by Human Rights Watch notes the same dynamic applies within the ordinary criminal justice system as well. Because this issue is bigger than just immigrants. It's about a detention system in general that is flawed. So this is the thing I think that should worry people the most, because again, this is not random. If you look closely, you'll find the same kind of structure. A documented, escalating medical complaint met with an assessment that was determined to be incorrect, followed by a death within days of that diagnosis. Scary. If you look at the Sri Lankan case, there was a doctor who testified in Nagoya District Court this past January 2026, said that, look, her life could have been spared at 3 separate times before she died. That her dehydration and her starvation had progressed into a fatal heart condition. And a urine test weeks before her death had already shown the warning signs. In the Chichek case, he reported abdominal pain on June 29th. Went to the doctor who examined him on July 1st, and he said, you've got appendicitis, but decided he didn't need to be hospitalized. The next day, July 2nd, he was dead. Awful. That's not all. In the death of a Nigerian detainee, this was a man in 2019, Gerald Okafor. This was detained at the Murat Detention Center. The internal Ministry of Justice report revealed that the death couldn't be called inappropriate. And that was even after he had been in detention for 3.5 years and had refused food and water and treatment, medical treatment, as protest. I know that hunger strike cases are difficult for law enforcement and professionals to deal with. But come on. This last one, okay, the Nigerian case matters as well. And it matters just as much as other cases because it shows what accountability looks like inside this system. There's an institution, the Ministry of Justice, saying, I don't think that there's something that the Amora detention facility could have done inappropriately. And that doesn't add up. And in fact, this has been backed up by different agencies and even the U.S. government when it was, for example, the State Department, when it was actually issuing credible human rights reports. It said that detention facilities do not provide access to timely medical care. So that's interesting. So now we have 3 cases, 3 different nationalities, 3 different years, 2019, 2021, and 2026. Both have a structural failure each time. A warning sign, correctly documented, of course, but inadequately enacted upon. But the story is not just about due process, and it really becomes also an issue about who gets accepted in Japan and who doesn't. So, as a country, Japan recognizes refugees at some of the lowest rates of any developed country. 2% of applicants in recent years. This is according to the Ministry of Justice. But they made it harder. A 2023 legal amendment made it easier to deport people who have been applying for asylum more than twice. The current zero plan deportation drive is built around the same premise. So, for example, of the 318 people that were forcibly displaced in 2025, 52 of them had sought asylum 3 times. Now look, if I'm a betting man, I'm not really, Japan's not the place to go. Because if your odds of recognition are almost close to 0, why gamble on a policy that punishes repeat application, that doesn't punish bad faith claims, but punish his people simply because they've got no place else to go. For the Kurdish community, I think this is really important because there's a big one, a fairly large one, that's concentrated in Kawaguchi and Saitama. And most of these folks are Turkish nationals who have sought asylum for years without much success. And what happens is they are cycled through a system that just relies on kind of sustained, renewable sources of vulnerability. The public is not so accepting either. There have been anti-Kurdish rallies in the area. There have been online doxing of Kurdish families that have become a regular occurrence. The first one, I think, started in 2023. And then you have this community that has turned into a target of social hostility and a legal system that recognizes very, very little room for error. So Chichek's death happened over a fender bender in a country where the Kurdish community and the Turkish community means that their paperwork is scrutinized harder. It's looked at differently. You're discriminated based on who you are, being Turkish or Kurdish. So if deaths like this were producing reform, you'd expect the rules to get tighter, and you'd expect detention looser. Sorry, the rules be tighter around detention, and against law enforcement, they would have more discretion. But the exact opposite has happened. So in the aftermath of the Sri Lankan case, Wishma's case, the government actually withdrew a bill that would have made deportation easier. 2 years later, in 2023, it passed an identical bill anyway, and one that underpins the current plan, the zero plan. And the plan was to bring the number of foreign applicants or foreign residents, undocumented residents, an important distinction, to zero. And it produced 318, as I said, forced deportations. That's not enough, apparently, because in 2026, this is May 2026, the Immigration Services Agency announced that it was expanding the plan again, and it was adding a cyber patrol unit to monitor social media, looking for suspected violations and looking for people who are looking for work here illegally. It's very, very strange and very odd because Japan has prided itself on its compliance. It's ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on Torture, and the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And each of those, as I said before, have their own agreements, their own processes. And again, each of them have flagged Japan on the same core problem. Where is the line on detention? Where are the adequate independent complaint mechanisms for detainees? And look, for a G7 democracy, right, a country that prides itself on upholding the rule of law, there is a gap between domestic practice and the stated commitments. So, for Cicek's case, and this is an account of his family, there was no problem with his residence status, none at all. He had lived in Japan legally since 2019. What triggered his arrest was he didn't have his passport or his residence card on him physically. This was after his minor fender bender. And this is a lapse that anyone could make. I could have been out without my residence card, without my passport. I do that a lot when I go on walks, right? That's the thing you should sit with. The enforcement apparatus, the structure that produced his death, doesn't require someone to be undocumented. It requires a kind of wrong place, wrong time thing, an ordinary paperwork moment, a police encounter, right? And a system that is filled with so many structural gaps. So look, this is the thing that really matters the most, and I think the most consequential. This matters because Japan is trying to attract more foreign residents, not fewer. Japan's own foreign resident count went from 3.75 million to now 4.12 million. And it also faces, obviously, the aging, shrinking workforce, right? So there is a structural need for foreign labor, right? This is not optional, right? At the same time, you have a resident policy, foreign resident policy, that lacks clear direction. There's no coordinating authority, and there's no statistics to base a policy on. So this is a really, really bad situation. There's a lot of unresolved accountability here. There's a lot of political problems, and the political appetite, the current political mood in the country is arguably anti-foreigner, and it's not a stable, sustainable combination. So it's a very, very bad signal to the workers, to students, to long-term residents in Japan, right? That, hey, ordinary bad luck, not wrongdoing, can be enough to get on the wrong side of the law, and shows a failure of the system that is supposed to counteract those ordinary incidents. So that's all for now. Let me know what you think. If you haven't liked or subscribed to the channel, please do so. And if you have a question, leave some, or comment, leave some in the comment box below. All right. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.